It was an ordinary Sunday evening at Renee's kitchen table. Plates half full, 3 conversations happening at once, when she said something Marcus almost let pass right by him. "She got this text," Renee said, laughing a little as she scooped more green beans onto her plate, talking about a friend from work. Almost deleted it thinking it was one of those scam things. Turns out it was real. Some old apartment deposit from years ago, just sitting there on some state website with her name on it. $200 and something. Marcus nodded along, passing the mashed potatoes down the table, half listening the way you do at a family dinner with 3 conversations going at once and a 16-year-old checking his phone under the table. It was a nice story. It didn't feel like it had anything to do with him. He was 45, a school custodian, divorced 6 years, and in the 15 years since he'd left his childhood home, he had moved 4 separate times without ever once wondering what happened to the small pieces of money he left behind along the way. By the end of that night, a 2-minute search would change that completely. Now, before this story goes any further, let me ask you something. How many times in your own life have you moved out of an apartment, closed an old account, or left a job that didn't work out, and simply assumed whatever small money was tied to it was gone for good? Not stolen, not spent, just gone, the way a bad month is gone. What if some of it never actually disappeared at all? What if it's still sitting somewhere right now, filed under your own name, waiting for you to come find it? Before we get into it, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because this is where we tell honest, ordinary stories about money nobody explains to you, and the small, easy things that quietly make a real difference. At Jefferson Middle School, on the west side of town, past the gym and down the long hallway that always smelled faintly of floor wax, worked a man everyone knew by one name. Not Marcus. Mr. J. That's what the kids called him, most of them without ever knowing his actual name, the way kids do with the adults who are just always there, holding the building together in the background. Marcus had been head custodian at Jefferson for 11 years. He knew which classroom doors stuck in humid weather and which ones in winter. He knew the boiler's moods better than the maintenance company that was supposed to service it. He'd swept up more spilled juice boxes and broken pencil tips than he could ever count. And every single hallway wave from a kid who barely knew his name still meant something to him, even after all these years. He was divorced, 6 years now, and split custody of his son Devin, 16, every other week. The kind of arrangement that meant his calendar lived in 2 versions at once: the full week with Devin home doing homework at the kitchen table, and the quiet week where the house felt just a little too big for one person. He drove a truck with 190,000 miles on it, the kind of truck he kept alive himself on weekends with parts ordered online, because a shop's labor rate was money he'd rather keep. On Saturdays, when Devin wasn't with him, he picked up small engine repairs for neighbors: lawn mowers, generators, the occasional pressure washer, cash folded into an envelope. Nothing official, nothing fancy, just steady extra dollars that helped. He lived alone now in a small rented house on the edge of town, smaller than the place he and his ex-wife had owned together, but his. And here's something worth understanding about Marcus, something that mattered more than it seemed to at the time. In the 15 years since he'd left his childhood home, he had moved 4 separate times. A first apartment right out of high school, a place he shared with his then-girlfriend, later his wife, before they got married, the house they bought together, and now this rental, after the divorce split everything down the middle. Every single one of those moves in his mind was simply packing boxes, loading a truck, and leaving the old place behind. He never once, in 15 years, thought about what might have gotten left behind financially in the process. Not because he was careless. Marcus was, if anything, the opposite of careless. He kept a small paper notebook of what Devin needed each month, because tracking it in his head had stopped working a few years back. He was careful with money the way people become careful when nobody ever hands it to them easily. That Sunday dinner was one of the few standing traditions Marcus had left since the divorce. Renee's table. Devin there whenever it was his father's week. The same easy back and forth of a family that had learned to keep gathering, even after everything else changed shape. It was nothing unusual as dinners went. Renee always had a story going. This one just happened to be the story that mattered. Driving home later that night, alone in the truck with the radio low, the comment kept resurfacing. The way small comments sometimes do when you're not trying to think about anything in particular. 4 moves in 15 years. Deposits paid on apartments he no longer lived in. Utilities disconnected without ever really thinking about what happened to the balance left on the account. A paycheck once, from a landscaping job years ago that folded overnight without warning, that he'd simply assumed was lost along with the job itself. He had never once wondered what happened to any of it. He'd just assumed it was gone, the same way a bad month at work is gone once it's over. At home that night, at the same small kitchen table where he sat with Devin most evenings going over algebra homework, Marcus opened his laptop. Skeptical, half expecting nothing, the same caution built into him from years of scam texts and phone calls promising money that never turned out to be real, he searched his own name directly on his state's official Treasury website. Not through any link, not through anything Renee had sent him, because she hadn't sent him anything at all. Just his own name, typed into an official government site he found himself. A single result came back. An old utility deposit, from the apartment he had shared with his ex-wife years before the divorce, years before any of what came after. $340. He sat there for a moment just looking at the screen. It wasn't a huge amount of money. It wouldn't fix anything dramatic in his life, but it was money tied to a version of his life that didn't exist anymore, showing up now unexpectedly in this smaller house, on a Sunday night, alone at a kitchen table where he now did algebra homework with a kid who'd been in elementary school back when that deposit was first paid. He read through the claim process twice before starting it, cautious the whole way, checking that the web address matched the state's actual domain, making sure there was no fee anywhere in the process, no form asking for anything more than basic identity verification. It took him about 15 minutes total. No middleman, no finder's fee, no catch he could locate anywhere in the process, no matter how carefully he looked for one. 3 weeks later, the money showed up, deposited directly, exactly as promised. Here's the part that mattered more to Marcus than the $340 itself, once he sat with it for a while. Renee hadn't solved anything for him. She hadn't done any of the work. She had mentioned something in passing at a dinner table, the kind of comment that's easy to nod along to and forget by the time you're clearing the plates. The only actual step, the only thing that separated Marcus from every single person at that table who heard the exact same story and did nothing with it, was 2 minutes of curiosity and the willingness to go check for himself instead of assuming it wasn't worth the trouble. He thought about how many other things from those 4 moves might still be sitting somewhere, unclaimed, simply because nobody had ever told him it was worth looking. A landscaping paycheck he'd written off as a loss years ago. Old utility accounts from apartments he barely remembered the layout of anymore. He didn't go digging through every possibility that night, but he understood for the first time that gone and forgotten were not always the same thing. The following Sunday, back at Renee's table, Devin there again for his week, Marcus brought it up himself. Not as a lecture, not with a printout or a lesson prepared, just the same offhand way Renee had mentioned it the week before, passing the rolls down the table, mentioning almost as an aside that he'd checked his own name after hearing her story, and found some money from years ago he never knew was sitting there. Devin looked up from his plate, more curious than anything else. Wait, can I check mine too? Marcus slid his phone across the table. And right there, mid-dinner, plate still half full, Devin typed his own name into the same official site his father had used the week before. Nothing came back for Devin. He was 16. He hadn't lived anywhere long enough yet to leave anything behind. But he sat there for a second afterward thinking about it in a way that surprised Marcus a little. So, like, in a few years, once I've moved around and stuff, I should just check this again? Devin asked. Every couple years, probably, Marcus said. Doesn't cost anything, takes 2 minutes. And that was the whole conversation. No lesson delivered with a straight face, no big moment. Just a 16-year-old filing away one small habit for a future he hadn't gotten to yet. The same offhand way it had traveled to Marcus from Renee, and to Renee from a friend at work whose name Marcus would probably never even learn. Here's what this story is actually about. And it isn't really about $340. Somewhere between $30 and $40 billion, depending on the year you check, sits unclaimed across state treasuries in this country right now, belonging to real people who have simply moved on with their lives and never thought to look back. Roughly 1 in 7 people has something sitting there with their name on it. Most of them will never check, not because the money isn't real, and not because it's hard to find, but because nobody ever mentioned it to them the way Renee mentioned it to Marcus, the way Marcus later mentioned it to Devin. It costs nothing to search. It takes only a couple of minutes on your own state's official treasury site, or a national clearinghouse most states participate in. Nobody legitimate will ever ask you to pay a fee to get money that already belongs to you. So let me leave you with the same question this story started with. How many times have you moved, closed an account, or walked away from a job and simply assumed whatever small money was tied to it was gone for good? Maybe it was. But maybe, the way it was for Marcus, it's still sitting there right now, filed under your own name, waiting on 2 minutes of curiosity you haven't spent yet. Tell me in the comments if you check tonight and what you find. If this story reached you, please like it, subscribe, and send it to somebody who's moved around more than they'd like to admit. It might be worth their 2 minutes too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.